Hey there, everyone. Ervin here, and today we're going to be talking about the top 5 things that need to change in Helldivers 2. While Helldivers 2 for me is still a very enjoyable game as a whole, with the Escalation of Freedom update on the horizon about to add more new content to the game than ever before seen, I thought that it might be appropriate to talk about the few glaring issues the game does currently have in hopes that maybe we can draw some more attention to them and see some change come along with all this new content we're getting sometime in the near future. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about the friend system. The in game friend system has been, I would say, barely functional for several months now. In a recent patch, even crashing your game anytime you opened it with more than 100 friends on it. This bug lasted a whole week before it was patched out, thankfully, but right after that, and ever since, it's been pretty difficult to add anyone new to the list. Typically, unable to add anyone or get anyone into the game through the system that you haven't played with previously. My community has been resorting to direct Steam invite links to get around this, which do work for the most part, but even then, this also means that we're barred from adding and playing with anyone new using crossplay. And even with Steam invites, it's not uncommon for me to take 30 minutes at the beginning of my streams just to get a lobby together from my chat if I hadn't played with them previously. I don't think it's unfair to say that 5.5 months after launch, this live service title should not be having so many issues with its in game friends list. Thankfully, Arrowhead seems to be fully aware that this situation is unacceptable and has mentioned in their blog post that there will be major quality of life upgrades and major fixes for the social menu to promote a more user friendly experience. Let's just hope that it doesn't get fixed but crash the game again. And hey, maybe if we're lucky, we'll also get the platoon update, allowing us to have guilds in the game. Second, let's talk about the mission modifiers. These modifiers in Helldivers 2 have historically been pretty boring overall, unfortunately, and while I can understand that it may be difficult to create compelling mission modifiers that are not just stat adjustments, I would argue it'd be better to not have them at all than have them be something that detracts from gameplay, like, say, the 50% stratagem cooldown modifier did previously. While this has been reduced to 25%, the modifiers have become more or less unnoticeable these days, besides the Terminid map cover, orbital scatter, and the recently added gunship patrols. While some players may hate these new patrols with a passion, I do think this is moving the game in the right direction as far as modifiers are concerned. Adding patrols of flying rocket spewing death machines definitely affects loadout choice and gameplay. It's typically not a good idea to go into these missions without sufficient anti air answers, and they do dynamically change the way your missions are going to play out. Do I think the player base would be absolutely irate if we brought in stalker patrols? Absolutely, but it's this kind of thinking that's going to put the modifiers into an interesting position that actually changes the way we play the game. Several modifiers have also been removed just due to them being labeled anti fun. -1 stratagem slot in the bots was the definition of negative gameplay, as it detracted from your options with no counterplay towards it. However, me and my community always felt the right way to fix this situation was to create a special side objective related to this modifier in the form of a large anti air base that subtracts this stratagem from your loadout as long as it remains active. Now, this would have fixed the issue and it would have created a new dynamic to the modifier without removing it entirely. Same goes for the removed stratagem scrambler. While this was a very frustrating modifier for those that didn't understand the counterplay or even what was going on initially due to it being poorly explained, it did have an impact on the gameplay. Instead of removing it, I feel it would have been more appropriate to rework it into scrambling the stratagem code that you needed to actually input to get your call ins every time you open the menu. This would deter the use of macros for stratagems and also change the gameplay element from muscle memory to reactionary for the mission. This section is running a little bit long though, and I think the important takeaway here is that we need to see a more dynamic, gameplay altering, creative process when it comes to developing these modifiers, and less increased call in times and cooldown increases that only alter a few numbers and not so much the actual gameplay loop. Third, the weapon balancing. We've started to see things moving in the right direction ever since the Viper Commando patch, but it's hard to not recognize that there are still some ghosts of Christmas past haunting the game at the moment. The Slugger was unjustifiably nerfed in the same patch that took the Jar 5 well past anything that it was previously capable of, and has remained in this state ever since. The Railgun was nerfed into the ground due to other anti tank weapons at the time being very insufficient for the task, and there was also a very serious bug with the railgun, causing it to deal damage several times to the same hitboxes during moments of high latency, leading to the misconception that the weapon was overpowered in a numerical way. Following the railgun's nerf into the ground, reducing its durable damage to a laughably low state, the other anti tank weapons saw a reduction to their glancing blow damage, an increase to their reload speed, and targeting fixes, as well as a 50% boost in damage for the flamethrower. This has put the game into a state with the railgun bug fixed where the pre nerf railgun would have been middle of the pack at best and perfectly balanced alongside its peers. There isn't really any reason to leave this weapon in such a state any longer, and I feel it deserves to be addressed before we go doubling the enemy variety on the 6th. The Pummeler SMG at the time of its release was the one redeeming weapon about the Polar Patriots Warbond, promoting a new fun playstyle centered around low bullet damage penetration value and immaculate crowd control capability. The Pummeler could stun up just about any enemy in the game within a few bullets landing on them, adding a massive amount of value to the playstyle that was the ballistic shield. This was quickly nerfed, however, but with good reason as far as the heavy units were concerned. I won't say that that wasn't warranted, but it now does struggle to lock up Devastators and Berserkers now, which was definitely the reason that I enjoyed the weapon. And I'd like to see it brought back up to at least a middle ground with its crowd control capability, as it provided a very unique and entirely fair gameplay experience for those more support minded. The Plasma Purifier, since its release, has been a pathetic knockoff of the Plasma Punisher, barely scraping enemies for similar damage, with a charge up time only coming out on top in situations where shooting straight at the target is vital for success. This weapon had an incredible amount of potential to be unique and interesting that I'm hoping can still be rectified. The best idea my community has had in regards to this weapon was to make it a armor class 4 penetrating primary, the first of its kind when overcharged, and also dealing massive damage while doing so. This overcharge would then also throw the Helldiver from his feet backwards when utilized. Just like that, this weapon is now both fun and unique in what it does while providing some potential unique gameplay mechanics when utilizing that ragdoll knockback as an advantage for escaping difficult situations. Now, all of this talk of weapon balance, and I haven't even gotten into the mess that is the assault rifle category, and I'm honestly gonna leave that one alone for now. We all know it's looking pretty sickly as a whole, so let's hope they continue to work on it and maybe stop trying to balance every gun around the basic Liberator for fear of power creep when they seem to have no problem sticking rockets to Striders' heads like they're Dr. Evil. I rest my case. Speaking of rockets, let's talk about the ragdolling, seeing as this term comes up in just about every stream and every third comment or so on my channel. The western front of Helldivers 2, with the addition of the gunship patrols, has definitely been looking a bit like a bounce house, except the Helldivers inside that bounce around the house are having about as much fun as if it was also filled with an equal number of bricks. Every rocket and explosive in the game carries a much larger shockwave than damaging area of effect, creating the unfortunate situation where you are thrown to the ground if these explosives land even remotely close to your location. With the volume of rockets being fired in our direction, despite them being oftentimes easily avoidable by running at a 90-degree angle when faced with rocket devastators, or shifting directions as they fire when it comes to the gunships who lead their targets, you are going to get hit eventually, and whatever comes after that is going to be far from pleasant as you struggle to get your feet back underneath you before the next volley sends you flying all over again. Now, with the addition of even more enemy saturation and rockets on the horizon with the Escalation of Freedom update, I do believe it's time Helldivers had some form of counterplay to this problem besides simply avoiding the hits. The motivational shocks booster, for example, has not seen much use by our Helldivers due to its very niche application that happens to overlap with the more popular and more widely applicable muscle enhancement booster. This was doubled down on when they nerfed the acid slow and duration on the Terminid front. I don't think it would do the game balance any harm at all if this booster were buffed to increase the speed that our Helldivers can recover from the ragdoll state by 50%. Taking this booster would then give those struggling with the explosive nature of the automatons more of a fighting chance, and the heavy armored Chads a leg to stand on when they begin being thrown about like they're inside of a wind tunnel. Another important change I feel would go a long way in regards to this issue would be making it so our Helldivers recover from the ragdoll state in the prone position. To quote a recent post in my community Discord, as hard as it may be to believe, Arrowhead, we don't necessarily always want to stand back up into the volley of rockets that just knocked us to the ground in the first place. This would give us more very necessary control of our Helldivers during these stressful situations and allow us to more quickly recover and potentially dive out of the way before the next wave of fun can begin. Lastly, let's talk about performance issues. The FPS has been on as a steady decline as the Helldivers 2 player base, unfortunately, and this was not at all helped by the addition of the new jungle planets. Personally, I've lost at least 20 average frames since launch and lose progressively more throughout my stream, I imagine due to some form of memory leak. It's definitely not a great experience when a cluster bomb thrown into the canopy of X45 sends everyone's CPUs into a state of heat death. Now, with the update on the 6th on the way, they're planning to escalate the enemy variety and enemy saturation to numbers never before seen, when, personally, my computer, well within the requirements for the game, is already struggling anytime the game decides it's time for my regularly scheduled quintuple dropship bot drop. So I really can't imagine how the game is going to feel for me trying to play difficulty 10 if something doesn't change in this department. Very much hoping for some improvements on the technical side of things in this regard for sure. Now, that'll just about do it for my top things that I feel need to change about Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 is a fantastic game that I expect to be around for a long, long time, but I do also feel that it's important that we continue to bring attention to the problems that it's facing as well. Arrowhead as a developer has historically always taken extremely good care of their games and supported them for years after launch, so I feel very confident that not only will all of these issues be addressed over time, but this game will be here well supported for years to come. In the spirit of this, I will be attempting to forward this video along to the devs in hopes that we can maybe have some kind of dialogue about how some of these issues may be addressed in the near future. All of that aside, I am still very excited to drop in with the Escalation of Freedom update and take on my first super hell dives, even if I'm doing so with 20 frames. Thanks for watching till the end, and have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time. Oh, and fix bots shooting through massive rocks. That's some bullshit.
And now, another helpful tip from General Brash.
Erevin has provided valuable information on how the quality of our soldiers' lives could be most efficiently improved by R&D. For this, I am ordering all active Helldivers to like, comment, and subscribe to his channel. Failure to do so will result in the escalation of freedom, escalating your CPU to an early grave. Brash tactics. Use them or die trying.